Hello, my name is Jace Butcher. I'm going to be representing team number 38 for High Drip Wellness. This is our final code review and demo video. It's going to have three different parts. The first one is to identify how we applied our project to the ABET criteria. Number two is how we formulated our design documents and plan for the solution. And part three is the solution, the product that we came up with from the development perspective as well as the user perspective, as well as the engineering practices that we used. So on the right hand of the screen here, this is the ABET criteria that is being evaluated here. Basically what HiDrip is it's a mobile application that was described by our sponsor to us as the DoorDash for nurses. So it's able to schedule an appointment with nurses and have them come to your house, come to your address. Also have a range of different services such as IVs, COVID-19 tests, these kinds of things. And so basically it's for mobile nurses. We believe that it addressed these three parts of the ABET criteria specifically. One, that there was no obvious solution. The problem at hand that Matt Colina identified with his team was that there's not enough access to healthcare for people without transportation. This meant there was no obvious solution he came up with, as well as with our collaboration for further planning and development, was this mobile application called HiDrip Wellness. Number two, addressing a problem not encompassed by current standards. This is seemingly a new idea in the marketplace for IVs specifically. There are a few other products out there for nursing, but this one specifically tailors to our customer base, or Matt's customer base to be specific. Number three is involving multiple disciplines. We needed front-end development, back-end development, database development, design work, and also some healthcare knowledge when it came to stuff like HIPAA data. So this project encompassed many different disciplines and trainings. For the development process, we all had to dig deep and use our different skill sets. So this is how it applied to this ABET criteria here, and this is the general overview of our project. So now going into the next part, this is going to be part number two. This is how we formulated our plan. So this is the diagrams that we used. These are basically our data models, the user, nurse, and appointment. These are our main three data models that are needed for the project. Obviously, the user is requesting the appointment for a nurse, and then the appointment itself has properties such as appointment ID, location, time, etc. Here, the nurse has a few notes such as the contact info, appointments. So it may use appointment as an actual property within the nurse field. And then, or the nurse model, sorry about that. And then there's also a review score that I'll show you later for the user perspective that you can apply on the nurse screen. So our last one here is how all three of those data models interact with each other and how their fields could be important. So for example, the nurse has a name, a user ID, and then the profile picture. This obviously loads in the profile picture for the nurse, and the review score. This is seen by the user so they can tell which nurse they want to book based on reviews if they choose to do that. Both of these will have an appointment. A nurse and a user will obviously share one appointment. So this is how they all relate together, and this was our visualization that we had before development started. Now the color schemes, we went through a few and presented them to our sponsor. He liked a couple but ended up going with this nice gradient that we'll show you in the actual application from the user perspective. But these were our initial color schemes that we used. This is in our Google Drive as well. And the last thing on this document is our stakeholder plan. I'm not going to read through the entire thing, but we did outline how we were going to approach the program from front end, back end, and server as well. We did follow this to a T, except this is only, like we said, Android or iOS in the long term, but right now the application is meant for iOS. But as you can see, this is a general plan. If you'd like to pause the video, I don't want to read the whole thing based on how we approach the project, and this is what we stuck to as far as planning goes. So the next document, or I guess movie I'd like to show you for part number two, was some of our UI drafts here. These UI drafts were all mocked up by Sierra. She was our main design leader throughout the project. She did an incredible job. So these are some of her designs. This one here is the page showing all the nurses. This is the search nurses page. This one here was the book an appointment page. We ended up going with a service quiz, but this was one of our initial drafts. And then finally, here's the account page. And the account page looks completely similar to this UI draft. So this is something that she came up with prior to coding, and then we ended up making it happen. So these main screens were a guide for us going through development on the front end, and really helped us to formulate something that our sponsor liked. And he ended up going through these screens, obviously, in our last sponsor meeting, and really loved them. So these UI drafts were crucial to development. The last thing I want to show you for part number 2 for Formulate is our user stories. Now this is obviously in our Jira board that's linked within our project submission that we've been using all year. But I quickly just scroll through all of our user stories by user. So we have, just to list our members real quick, we have me, Jace, Sierra, Jared, Liam, and then Oleg. We all have a different amount of issues. An issue is basically a user story. This is just the terminology Jira prefers to use. This is the software we use for our planning. So I just scroll through all of them, and you can pause at any point here, but you could see, like for me, a big portion of the project early on especially was the authentication for the login screen. So I did a lot of the login sign up work. And then obviously we had a lot of research and design tasks to do early on, as well as we all contributed to the design documents. Sierra mainly worked on the service quiz and the account page, and then all design work. So she handled a lot of the Figma aspect of the project, and really helped out a lot with the way that things look on the front end. So you could see a lot of her UI stuff there. Jared did a lot of data tooling, as well as adding extra tools to the project and data validation, as well as assisting with objects and integrating Firebase. So he did a lot of back-end work for us. You can see a lot of his tasks have to do with validation. Liam was our main guy for back-end doing Firebase. He connected up everything together, made our data models, did the appointment logic as well. Oleg focused on mainly the appointment screen. He also acted as our team leader for most of the time, but you could see he went through a training process early on with React Native, because he wasn't too familiar with it, and then ended up being quite familiar and adding a lot to the output of the team. So you could see you could filter by sprint here on our Jira board and stuff like that if you want to go through sprint by sprint. But there's all the user stories that we had for the entire year for the project. So all those are really helpful for us as far as planning, tracking our work, and then also just making sure we're all on the same page together as a team. So that is the last part of part number 2. So we can move on to part number 3 here. The only 2 things I'm going to show here are the developer perspective and the user perspective. And then also kind of explain some of the engineering practices we used. I'm actually going to show you the user perspective first. This is just a screen recording of my iPhone going through the project on Expo. So I'll talk through some of the engineering practices right now before I start this actually, so we can get a good grasp of that. We use the Expo tool. That's something you can use within React Native to start a project on either a simulator here on the computer, or you can actually load it up on your mobile device itself. For me, I loaded it up on my mobile device, did a screen recording here. So this is super useful because this is exactly what it would look like for a user if they downloaded this from the App Store, for example. And this was really helpful for our testing as well as our visual aspect. Matt, our sponsor, really liked being able to see the progress we made on the front end, being able to see some of the functions we added week by week. And this Expo tool was really crucial for us. So that was one of the engineering practices that we mainly used, was React Native, which is kind of a front-end, back-end mix with Firebase. Firebase was our database that we used that obviously is a network-based database, so it's not like SQL or anything local. This is something that you hit with the network. So we integrated that within our React Native project, and I'll show you that a bit from the developer perspective. Here's the user perspective video. This is the login screen. We do have data validation through Firebase, so I'm going to enter a wrong password here and try to sign up with a new account, and you're going to see it needs at least one numeric character. You'll get another error message here that says you need at least one uppercase character. So the data validation that we came up with was one uppercase, one number, and then 2 special characters. So once you do that, and then you sign up, hit the sign up button with an account, then it'll allow you to log in and go to the next page, which is our home page. There's another one if the user's not found. So this is our home page here. This gradient, this purple, pinkish, kind of orangish gradient that we went with, was Sierra's creation. This is used throughout most of the application as an image background. Matt, our sponsor, really loved the look of this as it matched Sierra's Figma drafts, and you can see it's used throughout the project. But here on the home screen, you have a home tab, an activity tab, an account tab. Those are our three main screens. The service quiz determines what kind of help that a user might need, and then it also allows them to schedule an appointment. We also have a nurse searches page so that they can see the actual nurses themselves as well as their reviews. All of that data, like I showed you in the models, is stored within Firebase. So obviously if the data says that it's a 4-star nurse, it'll show up in that screen as well. Here we'll click this activity page first. This shows if you have any upcoming appointments or past appointments. Once you hit the activity tab, there are currently no appointments right here. Here is the account page on the right. All these buttons aren't functional yet, but we communicate with our sponsor that can be handled pretty easily through future development. There's already placeholder screens there for them if they want to add it. But this was our sponsor Matt's favorite screen. It seemed he really liked the profile page and how it looked. It's just very clean. Also allowed a lot of options. This is the edit profile button next being hit. This allows you to change your name, email, phone number, address, and then save it, and then also change the profile picture. All this work was done by Sierra. Now going back to the home page, when you hit search nurses, it'll allow you to search these nurses based on their name. It'll only show John because we searched up John. It has a profile picture, a heart, so you can favorite the nurse. It has their review stars right there as well with a book appointment button. And then it'll show all of them once you search for that. So that's the search nurses page. The final thing to show, which is the main function, is the service quiz. So you can build your own drip. That's an IV drip. There's a beauty service, COVID, energy. It's important to note we're obviously not incorporating any of these specific services within the app. This is something that the HiDrip team can take and change as they please. They can change those options, add options, and then the nurse will actually administer the care when at the house. But those were just our basic ones we used just for testing. Also has a map view of your location. This is just ASU. So this would be a nurse being scheduled to come to ASU. And there's a nice calendar here. We can select the date. It'll confirm the date with you. Once you hit submit, the appointment's been scheduled. So now it's been added. So that is pretty much everything from the user perspective. That's the HiDrip app itself. From our communications with Matt, he's going to be hiring developers in the future to finish up some loose ends on the application, but otherwise it's able to schedule appointments, log in, have your own account, and all those things, and the front end of it is looking pretty good. So the last piece I'll show you here is the developer perspective of some of our engineering practices. So this IDE being shown right here is Visual Studio Code. This is where we wrote all the code for our React Native. All of it takes place within this client folder right here. This client folder holds all of our node packages, all the files of the code, our env key that connects us to our Firebase database. So this client folder pretty much holds everything. And if you see our repository in GitHub, you'll see that client folder. And just to note, by the way, if you are running the project, all you would do is start a terminal within the client folder and then type npx expo start. So that'll start an Expo project, and then you can start that simulator. But our general project structure here is that we have our Expo packages. Our assets folder has all our pictures used within the application and our icons as well. So that's how we can reference all those in one place. The components folder that I'll show next has a few different menus and components that are shared throughout the project. You can kind of see the general structure of the files here. This is a general, React style of coding right here. If you've ever used React Web, it's very similar. React Native specifically for the mobile. So one of the engineering practices we use obviously is React Native, but also has to do with our models, which we'll show you in a second. Our config here has everything to do with our connecting to Firebase. So without this firebase.js file, we can't connect to our database. So that one's very, very important. That's one of the engineering practices used. Another one is these are all the dev tools that Jared added. These allow us to validate the data, such as the login and authentication and stuff like that. and this communicates with Firebase as well. This isn't front-end validation. So these are our entities. Kind of have to do with our models. They're very similar. So these allow ourselves to basically communicate with these models and use them throughout the project. This is the main engineering practice used here, is that you can reference these appointment, location, service, nurse, all the way throughout the project in any page that you want. So that is kind of similar to the MVC engineering practice. The navigation is where we hold all of our actual screens. The first screen loaded is the main container, and that's how you can decide whether you're going from screen to screen. And then here's all the actual screens themselves. Login, search, service quiz, home, activity, and then we have all the extra screens right here once the future HYDRIP team adds them in. And then the app.js is obviously where React Native will enter. So this is the main pretty much code base that we used. This is the development branch. This is where you can obviously do some bug fixes, extra features if you want to do so. Otherwise, the project should just exist in the main branch, which is on GitHub and updated, so that is full of our final product of code and everything. And then the other thing I'll note is that this package.json and package lock, these hold all the npm node packages. It's very important that those are up to date and always kind of cleaned up and paid attention to, because that is something that kind of contributes to the health of the project and the health of a lot of the components and packages used from React Native. So all of this client folder within our project holds all of our code. The only really libraries worth mentioning are the React Native libraries and all the sub-libraries within those that are used within React Native. Those are all within our package.json file there. And then the other one is Firebase. So Firebase had some built-in functionality that we use, such as authentication. So Firebase can allow us to authenticate our users upon login and sign up. So you can't, sign up with the same email twice. Those are a lot of the main engineering practices we used. This is our code base, our user base. I showed you some of the documents that we used to formulate our plan, as well as I identified the problem at hand and how we decided to solve it in regards to the ABET criteria. So this is our full project. We're super proud of it and happy with what we got done. And talking to Matt, he seemed very happy in the final product, in the final meeting. So that's the final code review and demo. Feel free to rewind and check any parts out twice. And thank you for watching.